I never imagined that simply parking my own car in front of my own house would ignite a storm that would expose the ugliest side of my HOA. And the biggest twist? The very woman who tried to shame me ended up discovering I was her boss. It all began on what felt like a completely normal Tuesday evening. I had just pulled into my driveway after a long, draining day at the office. My car wasn't anything special, just a modest silver sedan, but it was mine and I kept it spotless. I locked up, grabbed my briefcase, and was halfway up the walkway when a sharp, cutting voice called out from behind me. "Excuse me, you can't park that hunk of junk here." I turned around, and of course there she was, Sandra, the infamous Karen of our neighborhood HOA. Everyone knew her by reputation alone, constantly patrolling the block, scribbling notes and filing complaints about anything that didn't meet her impossible standards. Clipboard in hand, she strutted toward me like she was a sheriff enforcing the law. I stayed calm. "Actually, this is my driveway." "That's my car." Sandra narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "I've never seen you drive that before. Are you even the actual homeowner here?" I almost laughed out loud. I had lived in that house for 3 years. She'd seen me mowing the lawn, shoveling snow, carrying in groceries, yet suddenly I was a stranger? "Look," I said, trying to keep my patience. "I live here." "That's my car. What's the problem?" "Oh, there's a problem," she snapped back. "The HOA rules are crystal clear. No abandoned or suspicious vehicles. I'm calling the police. We don't need outsiders cluttering up our neighborhood." Before I could get another word in, she yanked out her phone and dialed. I stood frozen, hardly believing what I was witnessing. She was really calling the cops, over my own car. Minutes later, the flashing red and blue of patrol cars bounced off the nearby houses. 2 officers stepped out, moving cautiously toward me as Sandra waved her arms wildly as though she'd just saved the community from a criminal. "This man doesn't belong here," she announced proudly. "He's parked illegally." I calmly pulled out my ID, my house keys, even some mail with my name and address on it. The officers caught on quickly, and from the look they gave Sandra, you could tell they were annoyed she'd wasted their time. But here's the best part. Sandra had no clue who she was messing with. Not yet. The officers left after confirming the truth, leaving Sandra standing there red-faced, pretending like she hadn't just humiliated herself in front of half the neighborhood. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd back down or even apologize. But no, she doubled down. "You should have registered that car with the HOA," she barked, wagging her pen at me like it was a weapon. "We can fine you for violations. Don't think you're exempt just because you're sneaky." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "Sandra, it's not abandoned. It's mine. You know me. You've seen me here countless times," she scoffed. "Rules are rules. If you can't follow them, maybe this neighborhood isn't the right fit for you." Her tone said it all. This wasn't about a car. It was about control. She thrived on intimidation, on making others feel small. But she had no idea she was digging her own hole deeper with every word. The very next morning, I drove that same silver sedan to work. I'm a regional manager for a mid-sized company. Nothing flashy, but I oversee about 30 employees. And I take pride in leading with fairness and respect. I went about my morning as usual. Emails. Reports preparing for a scheduled orientation session that afternoon for some new hires. Just routine. Until I glanced at the attendance list. There it was. Sandra's name. For a moment, I thought it had to be some bizarre coincidence. But when the training room door opened and in she walked, with the same smug posture, the same self-satisfied expression, and yes, still carrying a clipboard, I nearly burst out laughing. She didn't notice me right away. She was too busy chatting up another trainee, bragging about her leadership experience, and how she'd surely be climbing the ladder faster than the rest. The arrogance was undeniable. I kept my cool, letting her get comfortable. And when the clock struck 2, I stepped up to the front of the room. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm your regional manager, and I'll be leading today's orientation." Sandra's head snapped up like she'd been struck by lightning. Her jaw practically hit the floor. The color drained from her cheeks as if she'd just seen a ghost. I offered the faintest smile before continuing. "Let's begin." In that moment, I knew the afternoon was about to get very interesting. Sandra sat frozen in her chair, gripping her pen so tightly her knuckles turned pale. For once, the self-appointed queen of the HOA had no words. That smug smirk she normally wore was gone, replaced by sheer shock. I could almost hear her thoughts racing, piecing together that the very man she accused of being a trespasser was now standing in front of her as her boss. I kept my composure. There was no need for the rest of the trainees to know about the drama that had unfolded on our street the night before. So I launched straight into the session as if everything were perfectly ordinary. Today we're going to cover company policies, expectations, and the values we uphold. Respect, communication, and professionalism, those are the cornerstones here. As I spoke, I noticed Sandra shifting uncomfortably. Her eyes flicked up at me, then darted back to her notebook, clearly embarrassed. She didn't dare interrupt. When I posed questions to the group, hands went up all around the room, but not hers. She stayed quiet, scribbling random lines on paper just to look busy. The woman who always dominated HOA meetings suddenly seemed like a school kid caught misbehaving. Midway through the training, I walked the room, checking in with each new hire. When I stopped at Sandra's desk, she kept her head down, pretending to be focused. "Doing all right, Sandra?" I asked casually. She gave a quick nod, her voice trembling. "Yes, sir." "Sir." The irony almost made me laugh. Just yesterday, she'd called the police on me, demanding proof I belonged in my own home. Now she couldn't even meet my eyes. When the session wrapped up, I dismissed the group, but asked Sandra to stay behind. The others filed out quietly, sensing the tension in the air. Once the room was empty, I leaned against the desk, arms folded. "So, you live in my neighborhood?" Sandra swallowed hard. I didn't realize. I thought..." "You thought what?" I pressed. "That I was some stranger? That calling the cops over a car parked in its own driveway was reasonable?" Her lips parted, but no excuse came out. For once, she had no handbook, no rules to hide behind. "I expect professionalism here at work," I said firmly, "and what you did yesterday was anything but professional." Her face turned crimson. She shifted uncomfortably, caught with no way out. I didn't mean for it to go that far," she muttered at last, staring down at the floor. "I just wanted to protect the neighborhood." "By calling the police on a homeowner?" I raised an eyebrow. "On your boss, no less?" "That's not protection, Sandra. That's harassment." Her lips quivered, but I wasn't finished. "This company values respect and sound judgment. You represent us inside and outside the office. If you treat neighbors like criminals, what does that say about how you'll treat clients? Or your coworkers?" She nodded quickly, desperate to end the lecture. "It won't happen again. I promise." I studied her for a moment. For the first time, Sandra wasn't in control. The authority she clung to in the neighborhood meant nothing here. "Good," I said evenly. "Because if it does, not only will your neighbors know who you are, but so will HR." The silence stretched. Finally, she whispered, "Yes." "Sir," I dismissed her, and she bolted from the room, practically tripping over herself to escape. But the story didn't end there. That weekend, the HOA held its monthly meeting. Normally, I avoided them. They were nothing more than a platform for Sandra to air petty grievances. But this time, I decided to attend. I wanted to see how she'd carry herself now. When I arrived, Sandra was already at the front, clipboard in hand as always. But her demeanor was different. Her voice was quieter, her tone cautious. Instead of launching into her usual tirade of complaints about weeds, paint colors, and suspicious cars, she suggested community cleanups, volunteer drives, and even offered thanks to neighbors for their efforts. The residents exchanged bewildered glances. A few even smiled, relieved that, for once, Sandra wasn't tearing people down. I sat in the back with my arms crossed, observing the change. Maybe it was temporary, and maybe her old habits would creep back in. But one thing was certain. She now understood that her actions had real consequences. At home and at work. Because no matter how powerful she thought she was in the HOA, when the day was done, she still answered to me. And that was a reality she would never forget. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more outrageous HOA and Karen tales. Your support keeps me motivated to bring you even more unbelievable stories.